Hello and welcome. Happy Wednesday to you all. Got back to a full crew this time around. Disembodied Voice has not abandoned me like he did 2 weeks ago.
I'm here.
And of course, my wonderful co-host, Miss Flo Flo.
Hello.
The Painter Flo on Instagram. Which is pretty much where you just do social media, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because she's keeping up with the hip kids.
Huh.
Yes. Anyway, how are you all tonight? I hope the chat is functioning. Had to restart right before this happened. So, hoping everyone's having a good, happy Wednesday. Definitely let me know what projects you're working on. Inquiring minds want to know. I know, let's see here. Mandragora had mentioned earlier that he had finished up his War Dog Brigand.
I think our camera locked up.
Oh, did it? Oh, it did. Okay, let's fix that then.
Yeah, the camera's not moving.
Hold, please. There we go. What is a live stream without our technical difficulties?
El gato.
Why did my chat not have something in here?
Looks like our chat's doing great too.
Yeah, apparently.
Disconnected. Unable to connect. Last week, or last stream, not really last week, I noticed afterwards, mostly because I wasn't here, that there was no chat on the screen.
I think I know what happened. Maybe.
It didn't copy the link, I don't think.
It should have. I'm going to refresh it. Sorry, technical difficulties, as we do around here. Oh my gosh,
Hey,
there's actual
there we go.
chat. Thank God. All right, copy that bad boy.
I'm going to blame all the something crazy that happened outside. We have traffic going all around the building.
Oh my goodness, it's madness. Are you really not going to work?
So I'm not sure what it is, but we just kind of look out our window and look at all the traffic. So it's probably the end of the world or a giant kaiju coming through Albuquerque or something. I don't know. But it's probably what's
I just fixed
probably
it.
what's messing up our technical.
Yes. All
problems
right.
here.
It doesn't matter. Everything's fine now. It's all good.
In the neighborhood.
It's not here, not on my live stream control end, but whatever. Always something. Anyway, hello, welcome. Hi, Mandragora, Mr. Kyle. Thank you for showing up a little early. Revok, good to see you. Hello, chaps and chapses? I'm not familiar with that word. Paul, as always, my wonderful, amazing moderator. In fact, here on the turntable to introduce everybody are the last set of miniatures that Paul sent over to me. So you can see I've got my sweet new assassin and then some cool 3D prints that he acquired. So obviously Terminator inspired and Aliens inspired, all painted by
I don't
him.
know that
so.
it's a sharp. I don't think your camera's very sharp.
Let's
on
fix that. You're right. But I do appreciate you, Mr. Paul.
Want to make sure that our viewing audience gets the
Full
The
experience.
full
Sharpest image.
experience. One of these days we'll get a real camera.
We tried getting a real camera, but then it was too old.
Oh, that's right. We actually had a Canon and it wouldn't interface at all.
Yeah, the little Canon that we
Very
got.
disappointing.
Is
I say we got. We
it
already
not
owned it, so we were just trying
In
it.
the front, so it's focusing right in the front here, so it should be good.
In fact, it's the little Canon camera we shot our first few battle reports with.
Yeah.
Like 3 or 4 of them.
Not exactly. It was my mom's, right? This is the one we were trying to use. We didn't use
Well,
it for
yes,
that. Yeah.
that one was your, but she had the same one we had. That's
Yeah.
true. And the one we have, I think, broke or died or something.
Stopped reading the DV tapes, yeah. Paul, evening all. YouTube chat is up to its old tricks. So staring at a blank space for a full minute there. Yep, exactly. I had to refresh the page. Hey, Jeremy, welcome. Are you working tonight? Are you busting some shoplifters? Mandragora shared my newest printed and painted War Dog, including lore, on Facebook. I just need special details for its pilot now. Anyone want to share suggestions? I will take them very seriously. Let's see, how long is this? Okay. I can read this. Do you mind if I read out? So for those of you who are on the Wargamer Girl Facebook, you can see the announcement for this live stream and the picture that Mandragora posted of his really cool little guy.
Nice.
Which I can't show on here without doing a whole bunch of stuff. But I can read you the sweet lore. So,
On what? What's that on Facebook?
on Facebook, yeah.
Okay. So you can see it on our Facebook. Just open a second tab.
Do it now.
Exactly.
Just do it. And if you're on a phone, I don't know.
You can still open the second tab on your phone.
Let's see here. I am proud I finished this. I've just let my pile of shame evolve into a pile of shame and a zip drive of STLs I haven't printed. I suppose it's a really good way to hide your pile of shame.
Of opportunity.
Pile of opportunity. That's right. We gotta be positive around here. I got a new kilo of resin, so I don't have an excuse other than my settings still being wonky. Yeah, I'm so sorry that last batch was like awful. Anyway, this was a free STL on Cults, so Cults 3D, which by the way, you can get amazing like not 40k weapons, a little a bolt pistolero and a
Bolt pistolero.
a chain blade, things like that.
I think, is that where?
bolt
No,
pistola?
I don't think DJ got your Katachan knife from there. I think it was a different thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've still got that. I still gotta paint it. That has since been deleted, but I
Maybe
love
like
it.
A bolter bless.
A bolter bless? A bolt. So it didn't fit my original motif of Servants of Mandragora, and my print settings are off, so I printed the elongated, but maybe I printed it elongated, but maybe 10%. So making all the circles ovals, and almost dismissed it as a nice failed experiment. A good one, since since it was a print without assembly file. It came out of the Mars 3 like that. Oh wow, that's really impressive. Like not having to assemble stuff. And as it is, like most of the 3D printed stuff is really good. And you know, credit to like Privateer's models like that. When you get them, they're just fully completed models, mostly, unless you have stuff to magnetize.
Or you accidentally had them break in transport.
Yes, or you break it because you're me, but in any case, they, they print out pretty decently. Then I saw it lying on its back drying, and I imagined a war dog whose pilot was permanently locked in, subsisting off NutriPaste and its warped mutations. So lying in wait in a shallow body of water in the chassis refitted with corrosive-resistant polycarbon bronze, because plastic and steel equals plasteel, before standing up from the water to unleash chain gun and plasma hell on the interlopers. It's cool that all my war dogs have a specialist theme, and this one is no different. I am proud to award him my personal heraldic emblem, the Bloody Heart of Dravgis, on his groin plate. So, he's a good boy. That's what I'm hearing. Nice work, Mandragora. Congratulations on getting that done. That's such a good feeling of accomplishment, right? Like, oh, we know what that feels like sometimes, don't we?
Every now and again.
Shale, what are you working on? I'm redoing the bases and cockpit dueling on a Smoke Jaguar Trinary for Battletech. Yeah. Battletech doing it right, I guess. Plunder Den, how's it going? You feeling all moved in and snug as a bug? Have you been able to unpack everything yet? Shale, welcome. Chuck of Rhubarb, hey. Pete's Fried Chicken, hey, it's Miranda and friends. It is. I know all the technicals, right, Paul? We got through it pretty quick, though. Plunder Den still unpacking, but have finished setting up the new Plunder Den, and it's ready to go. Going to continue with my medieval village. It's gonna be great. Pete, hey Miranda, are you going to get the 40K Darktide board game? Oh, it seems kind of highly priced for cardboard only. But did you see there's a board game for Darktide?
I thought miniatures came with that. I thought they had. So I thought that basically they're pre-existing miniatures, like a pre-existing Agra and a pre-existing, like whatever the Zealot is. And so like.
Yeah.
So they didn't make new models for it, but I think it does come with some plastic dudes. Yeah, see. And then I think
Okay,
like
there are
a
a
regular
few.
sprue of infected Nurgle minions or whatever.
Poxwalkers and such.
Yeah.
Maybe. So, like,
So
Brandon
there's
and Tommy
one
don't
unboxing.
play board games.
there is that.
I mean, if you show it to DJ, maybe we'll end up with it.
Well, I did watch it. I watched an unboxing of it, and the guy was showing that they had those. So I was in the unboxing.
Okay, well, I mean, the answer is if someone else gets it, I'll play it, but I am unlikely to get it myself. I mean, as it is, I'm barely able to play Darktide. Like, you've gotten crazy good at it, and the last time I was in there, I was kind of derping around. I'm like, what are these talents again? So it was a little messed up. So even just keeping up with that has been kind of hard.
I mean, it's like, I don't even think I've played it in a few weeks. Like, I'll get on every few
So often,
weeks.
yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just not as rusty. That's all.
You're really good on that Zealot. He's all running into fours, no problem, just murdering everybody. I need to actually level up other characters in that game because I just have one. And
I feel like one is all you have time to play.
kind of is, yeah. Let's see. Mandragora. Oh, sounds cool. Plunder makes me immediately think of Zombicide, Black Plague, or Village Attacks. I could see that.
Apparently has a similar gameplay style to, what is it, Underworlds?
Warhammer Underworld?
Yeah,
Oh. Well, I do
Well, it's
like
like the
that.
hex-based sort of movement, and a lot of the rules are apparently similar, from what I have been told.
Let's see. Let's see. Paul, the black-green alien thing is a void clicker from Titanforge minis. Yeah, Paul knows all of the best places to get your 3D prints. For miniatures, anyway. The Vindicator looks a bit more red in real life. True, he is a bit more red. I'm probably going to add some more to his base, make him match with the rest of my army. But I've got all of the assassins now, all of them. And it's great. You just need to put them all in one list and call them the murder family or something. I don't know. I should think of something better, but you know. Thor Odinson. I've 3D printed about 3,000 points of Chaos Dwarves, and I'm looking forward to 3D printing several more armies for 40k and Old World. Are you... Okay, so you're doing this for Old World. Has anybody been playing that game yet? It seems cool. Oda, when you can 3D print models at will, the pile of shame becomes infinite. Well, yeah. So,
yes, it does.
do you guys ever like?
Not bitter.
Is it pretty bad over there?
Oh, we got so much. Well, we have all that terrain too.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're printing terrain. He was printing terrain for a while.
Yeah, no, we've got a lot of gray now. And yeah, stuff is getting put together and it's set up so that, it's ready to be painted. But a lot of my painting goes towards stuff that actually makes me money, so
Sure. You gotta prioritize.
Commissions.
Prioritize them commissions. Well, I mean, people want their stuff back pretty quick too. So.
I tend to be pretty quick at stuff. I'm a little behind right now because last week I was really sick. But
Yeah. So all the sickness I got, I apparently after getting over it, gave it to her.
I started feeling sick before I saw you. It's not
That's
your fault.
No, I don't think it's actually my fault. It's just something has been going around.
But I
that has
blame you
been-
anyway.
That has been kicking people's butts.
Oh, yeah.
Holy cow. And, like, whenever I got tested for everything, they're like, just a cold. I'm like, this is the worst cold I've ever had in my life. Really? So, there you go.
I lost my voice. Couldn't see. Yeah, it's bad. Bad.
Poor sad Flo. Thomas Grable, welcome. How you doing, man? Mandragora, thanks. I'm sure you've had a few stories like, no, Paul's giving me some... No, actually, Paul, I think you've had a really good run with your 3D printing. Let's see, I'd be super rusty on Darktide, but I keep installing the 1 gig updates every couple of weeks. Yes, we do. We do need to play together. That'll be our next thing. So, Paul and I recently accomplished the task of finishing Resident Evil 5 together. It was beautiful. It was glitchy. We had to beat the game twice because when it finished and did all the cutscene stuff, we were like, oh, that's really cool, but it didn't give me any credit for having completed it. So we had to do it again. But, that's fine. It was cool. I got to unlock Mercenaries stuff and, I don't know, all the weird Resident Evil stuff, like the weird outfits and infinite ammo. I got infinite ammo on my Magnum. That was worth it. So, yeah. Mandragora, I have to announce a personal tragedy. To my great, great sadness, I found an Acastus Knight Porphyrion STL, file for sale at a site, verified by another who printed it. But it's gone. Well, I mean, I'm not going to give anybody crap for 3D printing their armies, but it's like, I also understand why, like, it gets taken down.
Yeah.
So it's just the nature of it. Jeremy, the old world are really poorly written set of rules. I much prefer the older editions like 6th or OPR regiments. I'm not sure what OPR regiments are.
One-page rule.
Oh, one-page rule. Yeah. I have yet to actually mess with one-page rules. I know it's keeps gaining in popularity.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is just, if you have game systems that have been around forever and they want to keep coming out with new editions, new for the sake of new just tends to mean convoluted rules, you know? And one-page rules, have they even changed them at all? Or is it just, that's
I don't know.
that?
They were playing them a couple weeks ago when I went to Etten.
At Etten? Oh, interesting. Okay. Mandragora, nothing will beat the original RE3 Nemesis Mercenaries game. I love
Now you got to go
Mikhail.
up a little bit. He's continuing his story.
Oh my goodness, sorry. Mandragora, but I had found a different STL, or do I mean STC, on another site, and this one I bought immediately. Once my settings are down and I was told it takes 2 kilos, I will print my personal Porphyrion. Excellent
I always thought
Mandragora.
the Porphyrion was really cool looking.
Yeah, I mean, all the
He's as tall as a
Titans.
Warhound.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I think he's the biggest Knight Titan.
Is he the one with the big spear?
No. He's got the 2 guns on his side. He's the real chunky one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Titans are really big, stompy robots. Like, of course, they're all super cool. How's that Reaver coming along?
Oh, he's over there.
One of these days. Mandragora also continues to say, nothing will beat the original Resident Evil 3 Nemesis Mercenaries game. I love Mikhail and Carlos, but never beat it with Nikolai once. Resident Evil 3 Mercenaries. I'm pretty sure I played that way back in the day, because we had RE2 is kind of where we started, like my brothers and I. And by my brothers and I mean my older brother who played all of the scary games, and then the rest of us just watched. And, like, that was that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that.
Like, the only reason I'm playing Resident Evil now is because there is a multiplayer option where I can be like, yeah, Paul, save me! And that's basically how that gets played. So, yeah. It's great. I love watching them, though. I definitely understand why people play Twitch or watch Twitch for games that you either don't have time for or don't have, like, the mental fortitude for.
Or the game system for.
Or the
That's
game
usually where
system
I'm
for.
at.
I think for some, for like, what would you call it, competitive games, and you want to see how someone else is using something.
That's fair.
Like maybe they're playing a way that you're not, and so you want to kind of improve your abilities. I did that on Darktide, actually.
Yeah?
It's
You'd
what I
watch
learned.
Twitch?
No, it was on YouTube, I think. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
I
was
watch
watching
stuff on YouTube.
It's where I learned that you could like block and knock back the little bomb guys.
Oh, yeah, the pox bursters.
Yeah, because you like knock them back, and then you do your little quick jump backwards away from them.
Yeah.
And you can make them explode over there.
Yeah.
You know.
And not on you if you time it right. Yeah, you got really good at that too. Okay, so for tactical stuff, I would go to YouTube. Battle reports, relearning 40K, I go to YouTube. Twitch is like, you're just wanting to watch gameplay, but you don't even know that the person you're watching is going to be doing a specific technique, really,
Oh,
or
yeah.
a hyper-competitive thing. I mean, I've had so little time lately because the Stardew Valley update came out like in March or whatever. And
I got
it's
to
like,
play a little bit of it.
did you? I got to play a little bit of it too.
Yeah.
And I've just like checked it out on Twitch a little bit because I'm like, I don't know when I'm going to get to play this.
No, that's a game that will actually still run on the computer. So that one I can play,
Yeah.
but I don't play on my own anymore. Every so often, a friend of mine will jump on and we have a joint farm.
Oh, that's nice. What's the name of your farm?
Prison number 9. So I asked her what the name was, and she's like, whenever we can't think of a name, we just name it Prison.
And you've had to do that 9 times now?
She has.
So Miranda's been playing a particular game she's been trying to beat.
Ah, you're talking about Zelda 2?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, my Nintendo Plus subscription re-upped, so I was like, oh, I guess I better finish this game. And I'm struggling to enjoy Zelda 2. It's those random encounters and just how dangerous the overworld is. All you're doing is like just desperately trying to make it from town to town. You don't even have like items that you can really use. You have to rely on magic. And sometimes, now admittedly, I am playing the cheaty version where you can rewind time a bit so that I don't have to die a bajillion times. And I'm like, I'm not doing this.
So you don't have to play it the way we did?
No, I had no interest in
We
that
were
at
kids
all. Absolutely
playing the
not.
regular Nintendo?
No. And apparently that was the version I played for my original Zelda game, but I didn't know that was a feature.
Oh.
So I did play that one legitimately, even though that was the version. And then, yeah, I realized that in Zelda 2, and I was like, this is basically the only way I'm going to beat this game, because it's tough. Zelda 2 is way harder than Zelda 1. Just going to throw that out there. And I've watched a whole I watched a 4-hour YouTube video of somebody doing a full playthrough, being an amazing, like, master dodger and attacking in all the right ways, and I'm like, okay, I'm just bad at this. Like, that's the conclusion that one would draw. So, yeah. Yeah. Thomas, I am putting the final touches on Brodigus Thorl, the rune carver, for my secret Dominion army for War Machine. Now, have you gotten to play a fair number of games, Thomas? I know you are obviously an amazing painter and put together beautiful, beautiful dioramas, but I actually don't remember if you were playing much. Jeremy, I probably have that file, Mandragora. I have so many, it's ridiculous. Well, yeah, I think with the STLs, it's easy to just be like, it's a few bucks. I'll just get it now and print it later.
Yeah.
And you have like gigabytes of
Still
stuff.
haven't printed the rest of those weapons I got for the 40K stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Although whenever I print the bolt gun, I am going to remodel some modifications on it to turn into a sister battle bolt gun.
That's fair. Paul, Mandragora, RE3 Mercs was fun, but I really liked Hunk in RE2, who had to get to the choppa. Yeah, I know we did that one. And I would play the Mercenaries mode. In fact, for Code Veronica, on that Mercenaries mode, I was the only one who beat the level with Wesker. Because I learned how you just like run around getting everyone's kneecaps with a knife. It was like the tactic for getting through. And so it was slow, but I got to the end.
Mandragora has some Zelda tips for you.
Let's see. Okay, I'll get down to it. Mandragora, I wanted to like that one, Paul, but the real villain in that version was that one room near the end where the camera angle is blocked and the room is full of 8 zombies. You have to fight blind. I kind of remember that. Paul, yep, save room on the 2nd floor of the police station. That room ended many runs. Man, it was so disappointing because I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Welcome to Raccoon City. They recreated the police station so beautifully. It's like such a tragedy that the movie kind of sucks because all you want to do, like, I would have been happy to pay the ticket price just to like have a tour of that
Right.
of that set, and it's all torn down. And it's all.
Could have gone through and done like a virtual tour or something
It's
on the
such
Blu-ray.
a beautiful, beautiful recreation, including like the random statue in the police station. You're just like, this is what I want. I want the movie where they have to go find stupid medallions to open doors, and they can't hop over a basic set of boxes or something like.
Yes.
Like they can't go through a window, only doors, and if the door is locked, well, you gotta find the key. That's what I want in my Resident Evil movie. Especially, I mean, Mila Jovovich did a great job for what it was, but they're like not really Resident Evil movies, They're different.
Hey, I'll take the first movie where she's wearing basically a napkin.
Yes, I imagine you and many others would. Okay, so Jeremy, I'm not sure which version I have now. I only need one. And I know 2 nights ago I went on a downloading spree on Cults. Got a new head for the Croc Knight file, plus a ton of terrain. Terrain, I think, is really where the 3D printing shines on a filament printer anyway. Like maybe not so much resin because of the detail level and the material
The size.
and the scale. But yeah, like getting terrain, like I have seen game stores and conventions, like everybody has upped their terrain game and like it's really beautiful to go walk down those halls now. Oh dear Miranda, you're playing Zelda 2, Link's Adventure the wrong way. You should be grinding the blue slimes 2 levels so you can upgrade your sword early and cut through the dungeons half time. Whatever version I have seems to have me pretty much maxed out, so I am playing it the more fun way. Because, yeah, like, struggling with way less health and, oh god, being weaker and all of that. Oh, no. It reminded me of my experience playing whatever the first Final Fantasy that came over here was. Was it 3? It was one of those.
Oh, yeah.
I remember playing it at PAX one year because you could just go rent a game and play it. And after like 10 minutes, I was like, this game is awful. Like, how did this save Square Enix? What were the standards at the time?
The regular Nintendo,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
First,
Because
was it Nintendo?
Well,
Was
it
Super
had
NES?
random encounters, but they were the encounters weren't the only thing that was random.
It was the
also
level. Yes.
So you're level 1, and you could run into like level 3 encounters and just die.
It was horrible.
It was entirely out of your control. Like there's no way to know what you're gonna get into.
I was like, I love me some RPGs, but that was a little too hardcore for me. So yeah, I'm actually on my way through Death Valley to the last dungeon. So I'm really close to beating it, but I started back in the other night. I just got really impatient. I was like, I don't care. You have to go through these little set events where these little dinosaur guys throw fireballs at you. They're really good at predicting where you're gonna be. And then on top of that, you have to fight guys that you have to put a spell on, like a fire spell, to be able to kill. And it was a whole thing. And I was trying not to drain all my magic, and then I just got upset and turned it off. But that's the thing I love about my Nintendo Switch is that no matter what game you're playing, well, I think any game I'm playing anyway, you can just pause it, turn the sleep button on, and just come back to it like weeks later if you want, and just pick it up. I like that pause anywhere thing. Whew, so underestimated. Thomas Grable Circle City War Machine is growing here in Indianapolis. We meet every Friday. That's awesome. I'm glad to see that community building up. It seems like it really is an East Coast thing right now. Maybe we'll see some more here. I don't know. I mean, we were in the game store just the other day, and there are people who have War Machine stuff still, but they don't play because they don't know anyone who plays. Kind of similar situation. And then I'm
What are
like,
you talking about? We saw that notice on the little pegboard last time we ran.
yeah, so we have a quest board at the local game store, Etten anyway, and it was somebody selling off their War Machine. They were selling off
It was
Khador,
like
right?
War Machine,
It's War
big
Machine,
letters, and then
slightly smaller Khador,
Khador.
and then the smallest, cheap. I was like, so sad. So sad. Mandragora, I need to get Baradaga still. One day I'll complete my Circle Army. But when I do, I'll complete Tharn and Iona plus birds first. I mean, Circle is beautiful even if you don't play. Are you guys playing 4th edition, Thomas? Are you? Mandragora, at least the first Resident Evil movie had the inside joke of the zombies disappearing the next time they entered the room. Oh, did it really? Oh man, I have to rewatch that. I do remember seeing most of those movies in the theater, and was it the second one that brought the lickers in? I was like, oh, no, that was scary as hell. Because that is easily the scariest monster in Resident Evil. Easily. Of all of them. In fact, yeah. There were events that happened in Resident Evil 5 that might have gotten me shrieking. Let's see, the War Machine meta came back from the dead here, says Shell. Played several games, but it wasn't as fun as I remember. Last time I played Sorcerer 3, I got assassinated top of turn 2 through feet clouds and a screen of Manowar Democore because of a change in infantry movement with no free strikes. Well, but if they were already engaged, you're not supposed to be able to engage someone else from a disengage, right? Was that played right? The infantry movement is probably the biggest learning curve from 3rd to 4th, for sure. JP, I might have been suffering or enjoying some level of delirium and possibly ordered the new Khador Colossal. Well, I mean, big stompy robots. How do you go wrong? Jeremy, I will never play 4th edition, but I have found 3.5 version of War Machine on Facebook. Oh, really? Okay, so I guess, I assume that's fairly easy to find for people who just want to keep playing the old version.
I know there is kind of like an underground fight club of just 3rd edition players, like Mark III players out there, that they're just like, I'll just play Mark III.
Well, and I
because
wonder-
all of my models are still valid.
All of them are, and they're used to playing it. I mean, I think, I don't know. I don't know if AOS is if there's gonna be a break of people not wanting to play new AOS and stick with the old one. I think people were still playing like 7th edition fantasy, like old style fantasy. I mean, people can go back to old versions of the game if you have a community that agrees to do it. So there's probably just a certain comfort to that. Whereas it seems like rulebooks are coming out all the time now, and not just GW, and not just like War Machine. The thing that struggles with War
it's a
Machine is the living.
It's a new
rule
business
set.
model that I think they're picking up from card games now, where it's just this constant. We have to just keep cranking
Chasing.
out more and more new stuff, even if that means erasing the old stuff.
But
like,
it's very
constantly.
alienating, right?
It's alienating. It really makes old players not want to come in and be part of anything new. And
I think you need the older players to be in the stores every week,
Yeah.
pushing the game and being like an anchor that supports it. And they're like, oh, I'm always here, and I'm playing this game, and this is my thing, and so I teach new people. But yeah, if you kind of make them tired, then I don't know that new players are just like, oh, I love this game, let me learn everything about it, and then also be the person like supporting and getting other people into it. Like that would be a very rare person. For the most part, do you think the model has gone to just like buy the miniatures and whether or not you play the game is irrelevant?
no, they want you to play the game because it's a war game, and they want people in the store playing games and stuff like that. But it's like, I don't know. I think it works to a degree because some people enjoy chasing metas, right? Like, think about the number of people who haven't owned an army for more than 6 months. Like, they just constantly trade them and buy a new one and do whatever. And so for them, who cares if old models go away? If you're just constantly introducing new models, you might as well call new models just new meta changers. And so they can keep chasing, right?
Yeah.
And I feel it's kind of toxic, but it's all like I think it's a small number of people that enjoy that. I think it's a much larger number of people that tolerate it and just sort of just shut up and do it,
Like not that many people are going to leave the game because of
Well,
it.
yeah. But I think
Which,
that
why
there
would
are a
you?
lot of people that I don't know, like, I mean, even when GW finally was like, yeah, we're removing all these from AOS. And a lot of people were like, wait, what?
Something like 80 models, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, that's a terrible feeling. It's an especially terrible feeling if you've spent a lot of time painting.
Yeah, it's
And,
not the same as when you get a card, you play Legend of the Five Rings, and those decks just go out all the time.
Yeah.
I guess Magic does the same thing.
Oh, yeah, Magic's always done that.
But, I mean, what is that? Like,
You bought a card. Okay.
right, and you have a pack of cards, and I don't know, maybe the whole pack even goes away, but still, what do you pay for a pack of cards? Like $15? Which, I'm not saying is nothing, but you don't have that same
Well, I am
investment.
saying it's nothing because you don't have to paint your cards.
You don't have to paint your cards.
That's the
true.
biggest issue.
And
I know DJ's upset right now because a number of his favorite models to use are no longer usable for Tau.
Well, they're not
Like-
usable, or the rules
They're
aren't
just
good.
no longer a unit available in the game.
Really?
oh.
Yeah. No, stuff like that feels
Yeah, that's
terrible.
a feels bad moment, right? And there's that skew bloat problem, right? Because GW cranks a lot of products, but like just not being able to play with the stuff that you bought and invested your time in, especially if. And I don't know if you guys, I don't know how many of you guys actually play 40K in this group, but I mean, for me, it takes a year or 2 years to build up your army. If you're like kind of just going at it while having another life, while having a life and doing a bunch of other stuff, you kind of like slow grow your list. And by the time you get done with that, especially over a couple of years, the cycle is such that you may not, several pieces of your army are no longer really valid. And
Well, I
so
used
now you
to-
got to change it before you've even gotten a chance to play.
I used to fight that, right? Like,
yeah.
back in, what was it, 4th edition, I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to make a Space Marine army, because Space Marines are just always Space Marines. And it stayed true, because it's like you can stick them in the closet and then pull them out 5 years later and just go, all right, what are the rules? But I still have all my Space Marines. They're still 10-man units. They're still tactical squads, devastator
Right.
squads. They're still whatever. It's like the rules will have changed, but the units wouldn't have. But that's long gone now. And it's, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it leads us into our topic really well. Maybe it's a good organic lead into the idea of the lore behind
The stories.
The stories behind the game, the miniature games.
Yeah. I mean, and we were talking about it the other day, right? It's like, well, does every game need lore? And a little story from that is we were in the game store just the other day, and we were talking to a newer guy who just recently moved in, and he was kind of done with 40K. He played the Custodies, and he did not like the new codex. And he was talking about he was really, really into
Well, he said he hadn't played for like
a number of
since,
years, like
third
5th edition.
or I thought it was even earlier, but it was a long time ago, and he
Yeah.
had just gotten back in for 10th edition.
Yeah, so he played a little bit, then he didn't like the new
Bought
codex.
an entire Custodes army. And then
Yes.
they made some changes to Custodes, and he was just like, oh.
I mean, it's got to be bad, right? Because it's like, I don't think you always need the most competitive codex, but if it makes it unfun to play, then what are you going to do, right? Like, the whole point of this game is to theoretically enjoy it. But he was really into Conquest from Parabellum Miniatures. Yeah, Parabellum. And so he was showing us some of his models from Parabellum, and they look cool, you know?
Oh, yeah?
But he starts explaining some of the lore stuff. I think you and I were both just like, I don't want to know
It's
about
like,
this.
I don't know.
And it's like, it didn't really feel like there was any hook to it. And, you know, I haven't tried to read it directly. This is just from a player who is excited about it and you know, has a group that he's playing with.
Well, I wonder if one of our big things, because we were talking about this too, was the idea of like, do I really just want to start diving into
a whole other thing.
And I think that's what was getting us is this like, oh, and there's all these factions, and here's the stories, and we were just like, I don't know.
What is it Scott Pilgrim's sister says?
No, it was Knives Choi or whatever her name was, his girlfriend.
Yeah, what is it?
Whenever she's just like, I'm in love, and it just looks like this stinky cloud, like it makes the word, and he's like, yeah, and he
No,
just waves
there's
his arm
that.
through it, like, it's like I hear that now sometimes with the like new rules or new lore. It's just
I
like,
know,
oh
you're
my
like,
god,
no. You realize that as a player base doesn't actually dedicate a full-time job to you, right? Like, literally, our job is to pay for this crap.
Most of the player base.
Well, so I think to a large, like I said, some people, that's what they live for, is just chasing new lore, chasing new rules, chasing new metas. Just, they want novelty. Give me constant novelty. I never want to master anything. I just want to always be seeing what the new thing is. I want the new thing to surprise me over and over. And it's like, for some people, that's what they look for in a game, right? Like, it's fun for them. But I think for a lot of people, it's just a headache trying to just go, all right, what are the changes? What's the new stuff? Again, what are we looking at?
Yeah, and maybe just like a whole bunch of changes all at once too, right? Like War Machine had all of their Hengehold scroll stuff and then a crap ton of new lore with the new edition. And it's like, that's a lot to get hit with.
Well, War Machine there were a lot of mistakes they made with their lore, not just the writing of it, but where they even put it. Half the people we talked to are like, I have no idea where to even look for this stuff. And it's like, it's obvious that the lore is no longer something that's important to the company. And it's just
you
play
think
our
that's
game. Lore's out there if you look for it. Whereas it used to be, no, you buy the new book for any of the new rules, and the new book has the story.
I mean, they have the lore. I don't think they have the Hengehold scrolls, but they do have the lore in the app.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of the features unlocked by paying for the app.
Mm-hmm.
So they are putting that, like that does
Putting it
encourage them to
behind
put
a
lore
paywall?
out. Yeah, behind a paywall.
Okay, yeah.
But I mean, but like, I don't know that means they don't care about the lore.
Well, so if you compare that, right, to what they had before, which was they had no quarter. And no quarter would
No
come
Quarter
out
was
with
amazing.
just lore, just sections in it that were just about telling the story, everything from stories that were multiple parts over several issues to the Gavin Kyle files, which were literally just deep dives into some random character.
Yeah.
to just a lot of stuff like that.
Right. Different narrative scenarios, even.
Yeah, and so it's like there's just a lot of lore just floating there. And like I said, you would buy there's the new rule book. Came out. It's a new expansion to what we have, and it's got some new models, and most of the book is filled with stories and information. And there's a general overall story that's part of it, but then you can flip to your section, like your faction.
Yeah, and
it has
see what
your faction's involvement in that overall story.
Yeah.
And there's lore in the app if you want to look at it. Is not the same thing.
But I mean, is that a sign of the market changing too? Of just like them trying to appeal
changing
to
from a large market to a small one, because unquestionably it did that.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess the new codex. I mean, even the Custodes Codex that comes out has lore in it, and then the rules. So I
Yeah,
mean, they are still doing that now.
I mean, look at 40K players, or I say 40K players, fans of 40K. The lore is a testament. There are so many 40K fans that have never rolled a dice
yeah.
in relation to 40K.
It's interesting because it's like, yeah, the lore's pretty interesting, but I mean,
well, no, I think the lore is a major component that keeps the game alive for the most part.
oh, for sure, and that's where it kind of comes down to like not all lore is the same, because again, like when Conquest was being described to me, and no, not an attack on Parabellum, like this is just my one interaction, right? But it's like, it just didn't sound that interesting to even pick up to learn. And so it's not like just having lore on its own makes your game supported, or supports your game specifically. It seems like you also have to kind of meet a standard, right? Like,
Okay,
you
so
have
I
to have really
remember-
cool stories
What is
or
it?
cool concepts.
Wrath of Kings? Which one was
Yeah,
the
Wrath of
CMON
Kings
game?
from CMON, yeah.
Okay, and it's like they had some lore.
They did. I
And you
actually
can-
read their whole novel.
I did
for-
too. But you could tell it was like they had a game and you're supposed to have lore.
And they just built it
And
around
so they
the game.
so they just wrote the lore. It was pretty well done. I enjoyed it, but
And it had good game mechanics and cool looking models, and
but it's like you look at something like War Machine, the Iron Kingdoms. It started off as a role playing game module, right? And
Okay.
so role playing games are just all about the story, right? And so they really started by just building this world before they ever thought about making it a miniatures game. You look at something, and then again we go back to 40K. 40K was silly. 40K was just they had made their Lord of the Rings game called Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and then they were making just like, well, we're going to do the science fiction version of it, which is just a literal carbon copy, but they're not dwarves, they're space dwarves. They're not elves, they're space elves,
Yeah.
space orcs. And so like it started off goofy for a while, but then over the last several decades, there's people that really, really like got into it and started writing. I mean, people that work for the company, people that were contracted as novelists, all this stuff, started really fine tuning it, and over a series of decades, made a very full, comprehensive world.
oh yeah.
That now, when you look at it, it's actually really, really interesting.
And I mean, to the point where it's not even entirely obvious where to start. Where you're like, I want to learn 40K lore. And it's like, where do I start? And like, it's almost in the Matrix when all the guns come out, right? You're just like, Anyways, Gaunt's Ghost is a great place to start. Eisenhorn is apparently also a great place to start. I'm a tank.
Put this up.
Sure.
I don't want to.
You can touch my models. It's fine.
Yeah, I was going to suggest we swap it for something.
My Chimera.
A Chimera chassis.
That's right. Yes. I feel like the word Chimera should only ever be uttered by, what's his name? The crazy guy?
Oh,
Alex Jones?
Alex Jones. We're making chimeras.
Because it's the most funny line in the world. But anyway, yes, there's my Chimera. I've got 2, so I gotta get the other one assembled. And I've also got to get my Vulture gunship finished up because it's looking so good and I can't wait to have it in a game. So yes, yes, I'm super sorry. I'm gonna skip past some of these comments to kind of stick a little bit more with the topic that we're talking about now, even though we were talking about Resident Evil.
It was
I totally love the conversation.
title of the show.
It is the title of the show. I know. I just feel bad skipping comments. Okay, so I'm apologizing in advance.
They are being read.
Yes, they are being read, and I agree with the Nemesis comment. But Shale had mentioned for his game experience that the models apparently were able to just walk past the Man of War and then just murdered her. Really took the wind out of my sails for War Machine. Gosh, what was the
yeah.
movement on them? It's crazy. And yeah, those feel bad experiences like in the game where you're like, how does that even happen? And it's just like a mechanics thing. War Machine has frankly always suffered that. Always, like any Mark II, First Edition.
What's that? The
The mechanics
new players learning
giving
mechanics?
you a feels bad,
Yeah.
where the way someone beats you, even though strategically you've kind of done everything right, you have to know the obtuse rules, not just common sense rules.
Well, you have to know
to
your
guard
opponent's
yourself.
obtuse rules too.
And you have to know their, well, this case it was just general rules, which is the general movement mechanic of all infantry. But either way, it's just like, really, you can do that? Let's see, Mark IV is fun, but play what you enjoy. Fair enough.
Well, and I mean, I suppose it still kind of comes in, right? Where we talk about War Machine, and it started off, I think Doug Seacat, writing the lore for it. It felt like a real world.
It did. It felt fleshed
And
out.
The new
It didn't feel like
stuff-
it was overly modern in its take of like, oh, this is just obviously a real world, whatever, and it kind of is eye rolling,
Well,
even
no,
though it
it's-
has historical allegory.
It feels like a certain amount of like an industrial world, like an industrial age. That's it's an area that's industrialized, but it's still surrounded on the fringes by savages, by like the completely like
lawless,
unexplored and
brutal things.
Well, what do you call it? Like the unexplored and whatever uncivilized world, right? Like, and so that's where the hordes are, and then this War Machine, and it kind of had this cool sense about it where these nations had their own politics with each other, but at the same time, there's also the
Just
wilds
the
out
wilds.
there, and
In which all bets are off. I mean, you look at Gatorman culture, and you're like,
well, no, it's even interesting because Lord Carver
Yeah.
was trying to find a way to lead his people into a modern age.
oh, that's right.
And it was like
Yeah,
after reading the stories of the Pharaoh, I was suddenly like, oh, I actually really like these guys. And
Yeah,
Lord Carver's
like-
one of my favorite characters, and
And
I never
they're-
even played Pharaoh.
Right. Okay, fair. But I mean, they're unique from each other.
Yeah.
And like part of it's like it's not all just drab and dreary. Like people are trying for stuff. You feel a need to root for them, even if they're cannibals or whatever. Like there's things that people are trying to do. There's individuals within the groups. Like it's just not like this weird monolithic
Oh, you
thing.
even
It just
read
seems like
the,
everything's written so bland now.
The book with Cain,
Oh,
like
yeah.
finding the bastard son of was it Leto Railthorn? But there's like all
Vinter Railthorn, actually. Leto is the brother. He abdicated, and Julius Railthorn, who was the son of Vinter.
Oh, Julius was Venter's son? And so, like, you find this whole thing where he's supposed to go and assassinate him, but instead he turns around and he's like, no, we actually need a leader for the nation. And, like, I don't know, it asks, like, interesting, real questions about, like, how a nation stays together and, like, how, it just...
There you
it
go,
felt like
yeah.
there's so much that had interesting angles to it. And so, unfortunately, I think one of the reasons that I'm having trouble with the new lore is they're just trying to explain why we're introducing these new models and these new units. Right? It's like, it's almost more of a device to introduce the new product line.
Yeah, so it has that soulless feel of like, buy the thing, plebeian,
Buy the thing, here's the fluff.
consume and shut
Well, somebody
up.
had mentioned before, right? And it's like, he's glad you said lore and not fluff. And it's like, yeah, but that's fluff. When before it was
there you go.
lore. you
Okay,
know?
so the lore is like where the
it's proper
story
lore.
is actually paramount and the fluff is just to sell models?
I mean, historical games have lore, right? There's an actual history of World War II.
Yeah.
And so when you play Bolt Action, like, what these units did. You're like, and talk to a Bolt Action player. They'll tell you exactly what company they're part of.
They're
and
on
like,
it.
They get into it because the lore is actually what's interesting to them. And so the game is a
Yeah.
game they have fun with, but the lore is something that they just think about when they're not playing the game. They think about it when they're, bored during a meeting at work, like they're like, ah, man, I'm more interested in thinking about this thing,
Well, and it has the double duty almost of being like, oh yeah, also it's like the lore of our world, so it's kind of useful.
Well, that gives you a little bit of historical context, but
Yeah.
But then you look at the lore of a game, And I almost think of it, we were talking about it earlier, where it's like, well, when you play like Star Wars Legion, since the 70s, there's been Wookiees. And so, there's, what is the planet of Kashyyyk? There's, units of Wookiees. So if you buy a unit of Wookiees for Star Wars Legion, they're never going to cancel that unit out because you're like, because they're Wookiees.
Yeah, well, it would be foolish to do so.
Well, what are you going to do? Are you changing the lore? Are you saying there's not Wookiees anymore?
Well,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like, that doesn't make any sense because the lore is bigger than the game.
So I watched a video, Guerrilla Gaming, talking to Adam from Tabletop Minions. It was like a podcast they did a few days ago. And one of the things they mentioned is like licensed games, how there is that sort of built-in audience. And there's also built-in stories, right? Because you are interested in a Star Wars game because you loved the Star Wars movies or the extended universe or whatever. You already know that lore.
Yeah.
So the game is really easy to get into because there's just an immediate recognizability to it. And then hopefully the game mechanics support it being fun. Whereas like having to start from scratch is so much harder. I mean, it's why you don't see very many original movies, right? Because there's that like,
there's a
who
lot
are
of
we going to
reasons
sell
behind
this
that,
to?
but,
Yeah.
What does Tolkien say? Evil cannot create; they can only destroy. And but if just to take it from that angle, right? Like, they're not just gonna remove, what is it, Horsemen from the Lord of the Rings game because they're tired of selling that model and they want to sell you a new one. They're like, no, there's only so many units that military units that exist in Middle Earth, right?
Exactly.
The lore, and maybe that's the way to look at it. The lore is bigger than the game.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I definitely feel it's true with 40K.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, so many more people know of 40K than play 40K.
Oh, yeah. So many people they know all about it because of video games. Or they know all about it because,
pretty
the
good
Black
reach.
Library.
Yeah.
Or things like that.
And it's the most gentle way to kind of even get into it. Like, I think more people probably learn about 40K by listening to like a Luden video than watching a battle report.
Well, I was going to say the possibly in the near future they'll know more about it from watching it on Netflix or on Amazon.
Well,
you know
yeah,
what I mean? Like,
that may be, for better or worse. We'll see.
But yeah, as far as those go, I think that when you have the lore and you have to be, what do you call it, like faithful to the lore, and instead of the lore having to be faithful to the game, then I think you get away with less, like less monkeying around.
Oh, well, because like War Machine lore did tie a lot to mechanics. Like, or I'm sorry, the lore. No, the mechanics,
It's the
the
other way
rules.
around.
The rules actually bowed to the lore. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I don't know if it does it in 4th edition, but I know it absolutely used to. There's units that have Pathfinder that you're like, I don't understand. What's the tactical advantage of having it? And you're like, well, the guy's a scout.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like he has Pathfinder. It's
And it's like you wouldn't use him that way in the game, but
he has it
his
because
story
it would
indicates that. And there's a cane or stick of some kind. That was one of the other indicators. Jeremy, I will not play New Age of Sigmar either. I'm just too old and grumpy. Well, Jeremy, I've talked to you a lot. Just old and grumpy about everything.
Stop being a curmudgeon,
Stop
Jeremy.
being a curmudgeon. How are we supposed to get this? Well, I don't know. Do we want wargaming to grow? There's a certain Flanderization, I guess, that can happen when a hobby, I guess, becomes very popular. Like, as things become mainstream, are they enjoyable anymore? What has to change for it to get across that
and
threshold?
I think that's where we're running into this problem where... So I think that in card games, it might have started in card games. I know in role-playing games it's been around for a long time. I remember reading an article or an interview with one of the WotC guys during the Spellstorm of Dungeons & Dragons, where they introduced the Spellstorm, and the guy literally said, as a quote, and I remember thinking, God, I don't think I would admit this, but he said, well, we need to reset the knowledge base.
The knowledge base.
Because people aren't going to buy books if they already know this.
So it's Spell Storm or Spell Plague? Yeah,
It was Cataclysm.
Yeah. Oh
It
my
came out at
God.
the exact same time as Warcraft Cataclysm that changed the world. And so I don't know if one led the other, but it's... But
and I don't
one of
know.
the-
I'm sure marketers are thinking like, no, it'll be so exciting. People have so much new stuff to learn. But to the fans, it's sort of like, hey, all that stuff and time you invested in your brain, we literally are wasting.
Yeah, it's like, well, I guess I can take these this stack of 40 books out in the backyard and burn them since they're no longer canon. You know, it's like,
Which is funny because you don't have to do that, but there's still something about that changes that, like,
Well,
you
so-
don't want them anymore.
but that's part of what the lore does, right? There's a certain, so if you play something like an MMORPG, you're like, yawn, it's late, I'm gonna log out, and you log out. The next day you log in, the world didn't go to sleep. It was there while you were sleeping.
Yeah, stuff was
It was there
happening.
while you were at work and then went on vacation and came back. It's something that exists, and so things like a shared rule system or an understand canonical lore are what make those happen in role-playing games and tabletop miniature games and stuff like that. Is stuff that you know persists even when that's gone. Like a board game, most board games are so self-contained. When you open the box lid, now that world breathes. When you close the box lid, it's over. See you later until I feel like playing again.
But the nice thing about board games is that a lot of those, they don't have rule changes or lore changes because this is
Well,
it. This is
it's
what you
just
get.
a box, right?
Yes.
But like,
And I think that's one of the things that I do have trouble with when it comes to like collection card games or playing, like even I know some stuff about like 40K and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
just watching the way the lore is constantly changing, the rules are constantly changing, the models are constantly changing.
yeah. It's
It's
exhausting.
very much it does not make me want to actually invest in it
Okay.
because I feel
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's a waste.
no, I think a lot of, you know that, what is it, the dolly out, zoom in trick, you know, that was popularized in Vertigo, the movie Vertigo, but it does it in Jaws too, when he's looking out and it's like, and he sees it. It's that like weird effect, you know, where it makes a hallway look like it gets real long, or,
it
you know.
creates a sense of dread.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, I think a lot of people, whenever they look into these, like, some of these games and stuff, it's already daunting because, like, woo, there's a lot here. Okay, it's a lot. And then when you find out, oh no, it's constantly changing, and you may read an entire novel, and then that's just nothing by the time you're done reading it. Or you might buy a rule book. I mean, 40K already does this. You might buy a rule book, and by the time you break the plastic off of it and open it, none of those stats are correct.
Well, yeah, and that was when like DJ got the
Yeah.
towel box at the Crute, and it came with the codex, and they're like, yeah, but none of the points are valid.
It's like, yeah,
and
just throw that
we're
out.
not updating the points until we release it separately. So you're gonna have to wait 2 months after you bought the codex for you to be able to put together an army with these new points.
And so I think a lot of people.
But we sure got your money.
Well, I think when a lot of people see that, I think it just makes that little optical effect I just described, where people are like, "Oh my God, I feel like I'm in a nightmare. I'm just gonna back away slowly," and then they're out, and they're not someone who's playing these games, right? And it's like I think that's I think that it's a business model that has short-term rewards, right? Like constantly producing new models and constantly retiring old models. And by old, I mean some of them that are only
5 years old.
a year and a half old and stuff
Oh.
like that. I think in the Age of Sigmar one, I think some of those really were like 18 months old or something like that. It was like, it was ridiculous, but I think that I think it's stunting it. And Games Workshop can get away with murder. They always have, right? They're the biggest game, so it is what it is. But I think a lot of the smaller games are going to really suffer from those things.
Well, if they try to do that,
But they all are.
I don't know. I don't know if like Weird's gone ham on a bunch of new models or
I know
BattleTech's gone
Flow
ham.
Weird.
follows a lot of it. Have they retired out anything yet? Or
Well, I mean, when the new edition came out, they had killed off like, I think it was one model per faction. Like one leader per faction, and then they came out with a new faction. So they do have a new faction in there.
so
that
they're
you can-
creating some churn.
So there's some, but I don't think it's been too much, especially since instead of
Are they still
changing up
playable?
Malifaux, there is versions that you can play them
But
in, but
not
they're
the
dead
current.
in the lore.
Yeah, so
or
if it's not
missing.
the current version, then it's one of those things. They're like, well, there's an old version, and it's just like, yeah, it's called Mark
Yeah.
III. Yeah, it's called
Yeah,
like second
no.
edition. It's like,
They're
Yeah.
gone. I
Yeah.
think Lilith is one of the ones that's gone.
Yeah, she did go away.
But what's interesting in the way they did it is that they have Malifaux and then they have Through the Breach,
Which
or
is
the
the
other
role-playing
side.
game.
Well, Through the Breach is
Through the Breach is the role-playing.
role-playing game, right?
which
Yeah.
has, it's going to have its own set of lore. And then they have the other side, which is when Malifaux comes into Earth.
The real world, our world, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's instead of expanding so much that it becomes unmanageable as far as Malifaux, they just created another system. It's under the same umbrella,
Yeah.
and so they're able to explore more there and expand on the lore without over encumbering one side of it, I think.
You're also talking about much smaller model counts, too.
Yes. Much
Yeah, well,
smaller,
yeah.
But the thing about the much smaller model count when it comes to Malifaux is that basically each of those models does have a backstory. It's not going to be like 40K where you're like, well, and then this unit,
Yeah. Here's
and
my
then this
sergeant.
unit, and this type of tank, or this type of flyer, this is what that is.
Right.
And the whole thing does this. This is specific characters that you actually invest in, and you're following their story.
So
Okay.
I always felt like, so first of all, like Bolt Action, we talked about that lore. There's no new lore. You know what I mean? They're not
No.
updating and like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, World War II,
Conquest 47, maybe
pretty-
a little bit.
pretty well documented. World War II is basically, it is what you think it is, right? And then you have games which, like I think Malifaux or War Machine, where you kind of have this story that's getting updated as you go. So those are more open to change, right? Oh, this changed. Oh, this thing. If a character ever dies, what does that mean, right? And I would still argue, no, you just keep that character playable in the game. Like, just stop. You know what I mean? Like, don't retire the character because they died in the lore. Like, don't do stuff like that.
Right. Give me
They're
Yark
still
back.
playable. It's just considered because they have different cards. or
Well,
something,
but when you start doing the different rule sets, they're dead and
Yeah.
unplayable. Like if they're not like, oh, okay, well, I'm playing my tournament. They're not going to be like, oh, well, tell you what, for this round, we'll let you play we're going to play this other system so you can play your boss. It's like, no, they're not doing that. He's dead. That miniature's gone. And so like the thing that 40K used to do, which was kind of interesting, is it was more like Bolt Action. Because it's Warhammer 40K, but it's like, well, we're not going to say exactly what year it is. Mm-hmm. And also, a lot of the stories you're going to learn could have happened 1,000 years ago, 20 years
Yesterday.
ago. Like, yesterday, yeah. It's like, all that stuff, it kind of acted like it was history. And all the stories were acted kind of like they were history. And so you kind of had this futuristic game, but it was like kind of this ambiguous, exactly what year we're in and where we're going. Whereas I think now they're starting to push all kinds of lore forward, and that's where you're getting stuff like the Ubermensch Marines and I don't know, like what's Belisarius Call going to do next? And it makes the world very tiny
Does he
because only
do-
a handful of people matter.
Yeah.
Instead
Yeah.
of like you have this deep history. Yarick, who cares? He's just some guy, right? He's not. What's the poster boy that just woke up? That's going to change everything.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Rabute.
Like, yeah, right. Like he's not the Ubermensch, right? And so he's just some general out somewhere. And instead, I like the idea where Yarick's like the main character of that whole like story arc. You know what I mean? Whereas now we're moving forward, so only the supermen can participate in those stories really, and it's all about change and changing the models and changing all this stuff. And it's like I think it's a bad direction to move in. Although speaking of that, I'm going to transition into another thing. You can pull up that image.
I was going to ask about that. We have a lot of chat to catch up on, though, so you guys are going to have to shut up for a second.
Yes.
I'll be right back.
But on that note of lore, I am finally
Wow, I
committing.
just drove Flo off.
I did. It's just like
You're
done.
It's like I'm out.
On that note of lore, and I'm going to get through these chats here, we have a live stream next Wednesday. It's not going to be the normal live stream. It's actually just going to be focused on a book review for the first Gaunt's Ghosts, first and only. So tune in. It'll be the same time, so 6:30 Mountain Daylight time. And I think it's only going to be like an hour, maybe a little less. It'll just depend on, my review. We're going to kind of figure it out as we go, but it'll be nice and interactive. So if you can join next Wednesday, definitely do, and we can chat about the first Gaunt's Ghost story and It'll be fun.
And we'll have the chat up. The little chat thing will be part of that live show. We're gonna do it as a live show and then pull it down right after. And then I'll probably fix the audio and maybe put a little opening on it, and then we'll upload it as an actual video.
Yes.
But all of the chat should be burned in on the screen just like it is now. So
Yeah.
So the idea of doing it live is to invite all you guys to join in on the discussion.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Ask questions and be part of the book review.
And then we'll see if I can keep up with this once a month, maybe? I don't know. We'll see.
Probably about every 2 months. It'd be my guess.
Maybe. They are fun. It has been a very enjoyable ride, but yes. So I'll be ready for that when that happens. Okay, so back to where we were. JP Got Rocket said quite a while ago, fans do the best work, play indies and heartbreakers. Fans do really good modifications, I think, to games. I don't know that you always listen to the fans, because I do think that killed a lot of Mark III. Like, if you... It's like, listen to your fans, but also have a philosophy and a direction for your game. Because I do think it's important to sort of stay true to certain core principles. And
I agree.
it can be easy to fall to a loud minority. And so say you have the most hyper-competitive people and you're only listening to them, they are going to drive out your casuals. This is kind of the nature of it. And so it's like you would listen to them, but then not violate certain principles that you have of like, well, this game needs to be fun and accessible and
Keep in
whatever.
mind, your competitive players are the people who tend to get in mini games every single week, like a bunch of games every week, and so they want new. They are the ones that want new, whereas most people, if you play 40K, most people might get in a game a week, maybe.
Yeah, what I'm seeing is a lot of people will only get to play a few times before their codex changes.
Yeah,
And
and that's
it's
very
like-
common.
That's exhausting.
What was the point?
Especially if you got the guard codex last time. Have a fun 6 months. Anyway, it's fine. It's all fine.
It's not fine, but it is what it is.
Jeremy says that isn't true.
Yeah.
War Machine models are only unusable if you play in tournaments. They are still in Legends. And yes, I do need to give credit where credit's due. I assume that if you're playing casual games, you can still play your older models. The general feel of it, though, is that you really should be playing the new stuff. But I don't know. I mean, how many of you guys are playing using Legends models?
So they updated Mark IV rules for the new casters? Or for the
Only
old
some
casters?
of them. No. So Legends is like still, I think, the old stats for anything that's classified as Legends. But they did take some of the Mark III models and move them into the new edition with updated rules.
Well, yeah, but they're not the ones
They're
that are
not.
only in Legends.
Yeah, they're not.
And so
So
I'm saying
you're
if
playing
you-
with broken rules generally.
Yeah, and so at that point, I mean, you can say it's true about any game. You just play the older version of the game.
Yeah.
You just play Mark III.
You just do that, yeah.
And so technically, every model's always usable. And so it's like, it's not the same. You're not saying, it's what I was talking about before, where part of what keeps that game persistent is everybody's on board with the current rules, right? I can go into a game store in Mississippi, and if I have my 40K army and my Mark 10 rules, then I'll be like, oh, here's my army, and the other person will be like, cool, let's play a game. And you're playing the same game, right? That's what keeps it persistent, and people like to... That's the way the communities stay together, is they play the same group. They play the same rules.
I mean, Jeff's mentioning in here that, he's playing in Unlimited, and I guess there are stats in Unlimited. I don't know if they're updated. Are they actually updated, Jeff?
Because just being in the app doesn't mean they're updated for the current edition. They might just...
Well, it
just
could be like the way
transfer over
40K, was it, whoever did Legends before, where it would be, because War Machine, it's unlimited, and then I think 40K, it's Legends, but they make a final rule stat for it, and then they're like, okay, we're not going to update that again, but that just is what it is. But they did look at it, so maybe.
Yeah, maybe that.
JP says some people refuse to play games that don't have lore. I could
I do.
see that, yeah.
I could...
If
I don't know the
it's-
point of playing a game that doesn't have lore, like...
Yeah.
Even the stuff that... All right, so Adam's game... trying to remember what it's called. What was the name of it? Where basically you wake up You're on a space station. You've been teleported there. There's no other anything forever in all
Whose game?
directions. But it's a Adam Loper.
Oh,
tabletop
yeah, yeah.
games. But like it's
The miniature.
it has kind of this framework of a lore around it, but it is enough of a, it's as much as anything J.J. Abrams has ever made, right? It's a mystery box of lore, but it does set some sort of a stage, even though it's miniatures agnostic. You can do a lot with it, but there is still a basic rough framework for lore.
Space Station Zero, yeah.
Space Station Zero, and that I would play that because it sounds interesting. It sounds intriguing, right?
Well, there's
But
a
lot of the-
conceptual hook.
Right? And so a lot of the people, though, that are like, well, I made a rule set, and then you do whatever you want with it. It's like, I'll make my own rule set. Like, I
Well,
want something that has.
There's
something
too
to
many
it.
things competing for your attention in
Yes.
entertainment to make you want to really go through the work of like coming up with your own thing. And if you are, then you're probably a game designer. So. So yeah, and I definitely know players that don't care at all about the lore and just care about mechanics, but I do feel like they are a very small minority. Let's see, Brian. I like the Sorcerer Kings for conquest, but don't really care for the lore though. Yeah. JP, I just want to shoot with shooty boom booms and stomp with the giant fighting robots. There's definitely some joy to that. But it is, I mean, War Machine has such amazing lore. Like, they even the concept of a cortex and these semi-sentient robots you create, like, just that alone, you're like, oh, that's amazing.
Well, yeah, it gives you a sense of what's going on, right? Otherwise, just play spreadsheets. You know what I mean? If you don't care about any of the story, about anything, why aren't you just playing the stock market?
Yeah.
If you're only there to just manipulate numbers, then do something a little bit more productive and manipulate just numbers, right?
I mean, I'm not going to dictate to what's going to be fun for
but that's what
people.
I'm saying, though, right? Like,
Yeah.
some people, sure, they can get into it that way, but when I'm looking at a game, it's just like, there's no point to any of this unless I'm enjoying this world or stepping into something that has something a little
Yeah.
behind it, right?
And the game having, like, an enjoyable lore and basis doesn't alienate the people who care about the stats and the gameplay. If they're both there, then that's the best
Well, exactly, right?
situation, yeah. Let's see, Mandragora, I'm not going to buy the app. I am stuck wondering what happened with Everblight and Blightergast and everything. I was fine buying books every season. Now I have nothing. Sorry.
Yeah,
I don't think I can answer that question for you
Physical
either.
copies.
I'm with
telling
you there, Mandragora.
If it's not a physical copy, I don't want it.
Yeah, same.
That's why I haven't been playing many video games or anything like that either. I'm like, well, they don't even have physical copies anymore for a lot of those things.
Oh, yeah.
Who let Dan into the chat? Lore Schmore. That being said, I really loved reading through the new Old World rulebook. Oh, okay. So you're into that, huh?
But
Who are you
what about
playing,
the old
Dan?
New World rule book?
The new Old World. Oh my gosh. JP, I'm more interested in the aesthetic than the lore. I like Khador because of the Soviet flavor of design, more Imperial Russia, but dressed up with Sovietsky trappings. This
Yeah.
is true. This is very true.
Well, but I mean, think about it. Everything has a story. You take the Kadoran sniper, that
Yeah,
girl
yeah.
with the eye patch, and you don't look at. I mean, you can't help but look at her and be like, oh man, that model tells a story. Who
true.
is that? How'd she get her? How'd she lose her eye? Like,
Well, that's another thing. Like when
asks good
models
questions.
tell the story is something
Yeah,
really
there's a
interesting, and
lot
I
of
feel like
stories.
that
Why she-
doesn't happen very often anymore.
yeah,
Like,
but
they
I
all
mean,
kind of look samey to me.
but you look at her
With some exceptions, right?
Some.
Like you look at her and she's really popular.
Well,
Anymore, I'm
if you
talking
look
about,
at
though.
painted models like Khador models, that model of that girl comes up more than any other Khador model.
Yeah.
Because there's an interesting story there that people just feel it. They know it. She's not the most articulate, or, the
No,
most
she's a
dynamic
very
model.
not dynamic model, actually.
She's not like the most, expertly sculpted face and most accurate gun. No, none of those things. It's just she has an interesting look that begs the question of what happened to her. Where'd she come from?
Brian says, I prefer to make up my own lore for my games, whatever the rules set. Yeah, I mean, and you can definitely do that. I just don't think that's like a common approach.
Well, and I wonder, are you making up the lore for the whole world, or are you making up the lore for the characters that you're playing with within a world? Because I think that's way more common. Is like, well, I'm playing these characters, and these are my characters, and they're doing this thing in a world that's already set.
Well,
So 40K would be a good example of that, right?
Yeah.
You're like, here's my tank commander, Dooter McDooterson, and he's been through 3 games on how to do this really thing, and I've got this whole backstory for him and his tank company or whatever.
Well, when you make up your own lore, does that mean that you kind of look at your models and you have a sense of what they are? Or are you actually like writing out coherent stories and have a coherent setting that they live in and factions that, exist? Like, are you going all that out? Or is it just you have your own aesthetic sense of what this might be?
Jerry, little changes are huge when they affect your wallet. A game that retires a $20 model or $60 for a unit is not a game I'll ever play again. Looking at you, 40K. I mean, there's definitely that feels bad thing. And whether or not you'd never play again, or at least not play for a long time, I'm sure... Am I sure? I don't know. Maybe the people at GW thought that, well, this is going to piss people off and they might not come back to the game. But it's being overruled by, well, we're just trying to appeal to new players with new stuff and just get, I don't know, kind of get as much money as they can out of people is how it feels. But.
Which is really dumb because if you think about it, you really need the old players to introduce the new players to the game, I think. Not necessarily the lore or video games or anything like that, but when it comes to a tabletop game, more than anything else, old players are what are going to get you into it.
Yeah. Well,
And so if you alienate your old players,
Yeah.
you're really not helping your game. But with GW, I mean, they're so big.
They kind of can do what they want. Yeah, like what they do, no one else should do, basically.
yeah. Well, there. I'll take your point and raise you one more, Jerry, which is how much is your time worth? Because if you painted those, add that dollar amount on top of the $60 for a
Really?
unit.
That's true. Paul says, lore minimum I want, a setting, who's around, and why they're doing what they're doing, and how they do it. Well, yeah, and I mean, even conceptually, right?
yeah,
If you're
at a
just like
minimum.
explaining War Machine, you're like, yeah, you have these semi-sentient robots that get manufactured in this cool steampunk setting, and you go to war with either other factions with, similar technology, which is kind of like, I don't know, Civil War era kind of technology. And then there's also these wilds, which, creatures and wizards that hold magic that can like change the course of the battle. You're like, okay, yeah, that's an interesting concept. Or in the case of 40K, you're like, well, it's really dark. What is it? Grim dark is the phrase, right? It's all grim dark, very, very brutal world of the Imperium, which is like this hyper strict, hyper oppressive society. But they're also facing against like literal demons who want to destroy the fabric of reality. And you're like, okay, that's an interesting lore. Concept, right? You don't need to see all the books to know exactly the details, but if you can explain it on a conceptual level, it is interesting.
Well, it's one of the
Or hopefully.
even the little details, right? You were talking about the cortex, where it's like there's very specific. It's not AI, and it's not a computer. It is
Kind of AI.
No, it's not. It's simulated intelligence. A simulated brain is what it is, but it's not artificial intelligence. And so it has roughly the, when you look at it, it has roughly the sensibility of almost like a dog. And so you look at certain ones, and so they kind of can have their own personalities, which is why I would say it's different than AI, right? Whereas the simulated brain has very specific personalities to the different warjacks. Like the one that Vlad has thinks that Vlad is his great-great-grandfather because warjacks, it's like a dog that can live for 200 years, 400 years, right?
Oh,
And
yeah,
so
easily.
Instead of you going through multiple dogs over your life, the dog goes through multiple yous. But it's like, it's just off enough that it thinks you might be one of its old owners, Or Sorsha's Beast 09 that, all of her other warjacks just got a number, but Beast 09 got Beast on top of it because he acted different than the others.
Right.
And it's like, so it's
And
not
it's a
even
cool
uniform.
little
They
vignette
have
of a story.
personality, which is just a brilliant kind of setting.
Plunder Den, I really love my historical games. The history of pirates, very loosely based on facts and mostly exaggerated tales, but it makes for an excellent game. Fair enough. Shale, reasons I like BattleTech. Story has been consistent, and the rules have not meaningfully changed in 40 years. Well, and it's like sort of what I always look at when I hear that you always need to be churning rules. It's like, I don't think that's true. Like, there isn't a one-size-fits-all model for making a game company. I mean, really, you find your audience, and then you should be supporting that audience, I would think. And so just a generic idea that you always have to keep churning stuff seems like it could be disastrous.
Sounds like a really good excuse to keep coming up with new models to sell.
Mandragora, I never played Hordes, but my Circle Army is very good. and my book collection is immaculate. Love it.
Yeah, nice.
Paul, but the lore that bugs me is when a dev creates a grand universe, but when it comes to detail, they back out with, but this information was lost, or no one knows where they came from. It's a mystery. You gotta be careful with mystery box stuff, right? I mean, things being kept too vague, you lose your audience. But you also don't need to be, like, I kind of understand.
Disbelief goes too far.
Well, yeah, and it's an art form, probably. I mean, you don't have to explain everything.
So it can kind of go in a couple of directions. One of the things War Machine did that I always liked was all of the history was from a perspective. There's no general information. It's always so-and-so saw this, or people have said this. And so the narrator's always kind of in question if it's something historical. But if they don't answer a thing, I love the idea that they set it up that there's at least competing theories.
Okay, yeah.
So that
like it's being talked about. It's not being.
like
It's
they
not
haven't
that it's
shut the
not
door on it,
acknowledged.
but
Yeah.
you can argue with your friend at the game store about it. You know what I mean? And it's
Okay.
a legitimate argument where you're like both possibilities or the myriad of possibilities are all reasonable possibilities. But instead of just shrugging, which is I think what Paul's saying, and saying, I don't know. They've clearly thought about it and thought it would be really interesting. You know, Blade Runner. Was Decker a replicant or was he not? There's plenty of evidence in either direction.
Either way, yeah.
Total Recall, right? Was it a dream? Was it not?
Yeah.
You know, like when you have a history that's that, it's not that they didn't think about it and just shrugged it or hand waved it. It's that they thought it would be more interesting to let you argue about it and decide.
Okay, yeah. And so that then comes down to the intent of the author
Yeah.
and whether or not, as the audience, you're getting the impression that they are writing it off because they don't care, or they are genuinely trying to create like an interesting alternative theories for you to explore. And I mean, there are definitely a lot of writers, look in Hollywood, like that are just like, I don't care. And so it's like, well, then why should I? Jeff Setzer, putting lore in the app is the 21st century. Post-COVID version of putting lore in the books and no quarter, all of which you had to buy. Well, let's be real. You do have to buy or pay for the app to get access to that lore in War Machine. It's definitely a lot cheaper, but it's also a lot less tactile. I mean, even if you go to a bookstore today, there's still plenty of young people who go in, they're like, no, I like the feeling of a book. And I think the idea of having zero option, where it's like, no, you just go here, old timer, or adapt or perish, is where it can feel bad for people.
So just for the record, saying something's the 21st century post-COVID version of it, to me always has the connotation of it's the far worse version. No, seriously.
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean,
can
it's
you
the
name anything
compromised
that's happened
version.
post-COVID that's better than pre?
Well, and there's
know what I
always
mean?
the chance that if you have something and it's only available as a file online, something that somebody can actually tamper with, which is something we've discussed before. Well, how do you know that the information you have isn't going to be changed by someone in the future? I prefer to have something physical, tactile with you. Like,
Well, part of the
it was like-
argument is that it's good because it can be changed. Like, that's what a lot of people
Well-
are like, oh, we can keep, bumping numbers around constantly
it.
so that
I
you never
hate
actually know what the stats of your units are.
Well,
You always
it's
have
like
to
having the
second
Mark
guess.
Twain books and having them all of a sudden be censored.
Well, but
Well,
that's more of a censorship question
Yeah,
or something.
but
that's like
that's still a
historical
thing
or
that's a
literature.
danger no matter.
Well, I mean, I guess if you're reading lore and then there's a change that decides that needs to get made, yeah, like you don't own that book in a concrete way. And come the apocalypse, which I don't think we're that far away from, then what are you left with when all your electronic devices are broken?
Well,
Closet
there's
full of
certain
books.
current event things that are happening with the 40K lore that a lot of people are happy they have
Physical books.
references to.
Jeremy,
I'm
not
always
everyone likes the app. I hate them, and I actively go out of my way to avoid them. And
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that is
I agree with Jeremy, yeah.
well, sure, but there's sort of like the old curmudgeon like breakover, right? I don't know that war games are ever going to appeal mostly, or at least financially, substantially, to like 15 and 25-year-olds anymore, right? Like it's such a all right, I have to temper this because it's like if you're getting into 40K, you can't afford to do it at that age, most likely, unless you are, lucky. And so that older audience is who's actually the ones that can afford to pay for all our crap. So why would you alienate them? And then the younger audience, like, they have so many good options. We were just in the game store the other day looking at Reaper miniatures. Like, they have kept their costs down. Bones miniatures, like $5-6 for a miniature.
Bones miniatures are so cheap.
It's so, it's wonderful. And so it's like, well, how do you get that audience? I'm getting myself lost here, but basically, I don't want to just alienate the idea of like, oh, well, now you can get stuff in an app. But it always seemed to me like wargaming, just as a hobby fundamentally, is analog. If you really want everything in an electronic format, then you are better off playing a video game. So the half and half of like, well, I play on the app, but then I'm moving these miniatures around, I think still feels weird. Like, I would rather have printed cards, which, oh my goodness, hallelujah, that you can print War Machine cards now. They finally did it.
Only took forever.
No, I'm not going to even complain. Thank you. I'm so glad they did it.
I'm not
Like,
playing. I haven't played, but I'm still going to complain.
No, it's...
because I can.
But it's such a positive step because a lot of the players do want that. You do want to be able to set your phone down and set electronic devices away. I mean, having breaks for your own mental health, even getting away from electronics and just being dedicated to that is really nice. So bringing electronics back in can be kind of destructive.
Well, how many people spend their work days sitting in front of a computer screen?
Oh my gosh.
And it's just like, okay, I'm out. I'm done for the day. I'm going to the game store. I'm going to push little toys around. And they're like, okay, cool. So here's your phone. You're required to look at more screens. And I'm like, I'm out.
90% of the time, if you're going to play anything with me, if I see your phone, I will not want to play with you ever again.
Yeah,
I am not interested in playing with someone who's playing on their phone at the same time. Sometimes you have to have an app to use something, and I understand that. But if you're coming over to play a game, I expect you to come over and play the game, and if you have your phone out, then you are wasting my time.
I don't know.
So it's got rules.
I do.
Jeff over, he says, printing paper books is way too expensive these days. Well, Games Workshop still prints everything. But
Adam prints his stuff.
Yeah, but B, it's cheaper now to print books and things than it ever has been.
With all the print-on-demand stuff?
No, well, not just print on demand, but yeah, just the technology in general. It's actually very inexpensive to print stuff. It's just that the modern markets expect everything for free. Like the younger generations want to just download it because you can download it for free. And so you can't print a book and give it out for free.
Yeah,
and
that's
so that's
true.
the difference. It's not that it's more expensive than ever, because it's not. But it's now, it's just the expectation of the market now is that you need to give more stuff out for free than you've ever been expected to before.
Yeah, that's...
I mean, and if you're comparing, obviously, if you're comparing like an audio book that you get off of Audible or something like that as compared to a physical copy of a book, yes, the physical copy of the book costs more.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But...
Well, think about, I don't know, I'm blanking on the name, where you download all the video games from. The
Steam?
Steam, thank you. I don't know why I was blanking on that. But think about Steam, right? You can download a $1 game from Steam, but how many times you go into Walmart and there's like a $1 DVD that's packaged and printed out and all that stuff? It's like, no, it wasn't. It was cost prohibitive at the time because of the physical media. So yeah, there's certain things that people would want to download that's cheaper.
But it's always been that way. Like, it's not like books have all of a sudden become exponentially more expensive just because, I mean, inflation. Everything's more expensive. But it's not like books have become more expensive over time to actually produce. It's just...
Well, it's not like all your digital media has become cheaper necessarily either. I mean, your subscriptions for everything are going up. People are kind of unaware of how many things they end up being digitally subscribed to for things they literally never own. And so in a way, you're just always paying for something that you don't even get the benefit of owning.
Well, I was going to say, ask the video game community. When something is free, they usually say, get away from it, because there's a little thing called microtransactions.
Yeah.
And don't think that the tabletop wargaming industry
no,
is.
I think they've looked
immune
very
to it.
long and hard at that, which is where you do get these subscription apps. They're like, oh, it's only $60 a year, $5 a
subscription
month.
apps or apps that you
now.
have to keep paying to update this faction and that faction, and you have this thing.
Yep.
Like they have microtransactions and subscription models just as well, and it's not cheaper really.
Well, it's getting there. I mean, so for the college folks, I mean, remember when you could get your digital textbook, or you had where you bought the whole stupid book so you could get an online key to access like the stuff for the class? Like they charge you $180 for code in the book or more, yeah,
Well, okay, maybe even put it this way, right?
because it became such a racket.
Maybe you can download a faction or a codex for free, but never before did you have to pay $35 for a single 28 millimeter miniature before. You're paying for it somewhere. You always are.
That's also true. Revok, 40K lore is overwhelming for a newbie. I think it can scare a lot of people, which is a shame. Oh yeah, I mean, YouTube has probably done more to help people get into 40K than any of the Black Library, because you can listen to a lore video and be like, oh, that's interesting. And you can get a thread of something to look up and then find a book that would be where you want to start.
I think Black Library is daunting because there's like how many books in
Oh,
it?
so many.
And there's no book called "This is where you start." You know what I mean?
That's true. That is true.
40K, a primer. You know.
Mandragora, it feels like a decade later, but I still remember Wrath of Kings lore from the Kickstarter write-ups. It was such clever, creative, and picture painting writing. It was pretty good. They leaned
I
a lot
liked
into
it.
political intrigue, but they did make it work. Let's see.
No, I enjoyed it for sure, but it's just you could kind of feel that it was there as a way to say, okay, these factions have lore, and it's like I felt like it had the potential to keep going, but if you'll notice, I don't think they did continue writing lore for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, well, that's kind of probably telling in its own right then.
Yeah. Paul says, it's a skill to explain 40K simplified. I've done it a few times and have a good technique now. So it's something you have to learn. You don't even play 40K.
Yeah, I know, it's interesting.
JP, I just read Dune again. It's all fluff for the games, even the historicals. Game companies need to survive. Yeah, but there's more than one business model to do that, right?
Yeah, there's so many games that have taken lore from Dune.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. So I always laugh like GW. It's like, oh, we need to protect our IP. I'm like, your IP?
It's like when a pirate gets upset because, you know, he doesn't want anyone
You're
to steal his
robbing me.
booty.
Like,
You're like,
Yeah.
you're trying to take what I've rightfully stolen.
Brian, I like War Machine lore. However, I won't go near that company anymore. Sad. I really like their old lore. And one of the things we mentioned, or you mentioned the other day when we were talking about it, is that War Machine lore started out as an RPG, and maybe that had a different effect on how the lore got written up, as opposed to it just being around a miniature game initially.
Well, I think there is interesting because the world was rendered such that you couldn't even clearly slice it up into factions. There
Yeah.
ended up just being like, well, there's mercenaries and minions, because there's like little micro factions, because the world is, you know, complicated as a world should be.
Well, yeah, and maybe that becomes an issue of like what voice is writing these
Yeah.
things. Paul Jinkerson, hey Paul, how you doing?
Oh, hey.
Wish I could go to Valhalla again. Miss you guys.
Fabian.
We'll miss you too. Revak, Paul, I think that's something that needs an experienced guide to lead new people through all the gumph just to get them started. Jeremy, they're printing books. Let's see, they were printing books. They were just not putting the lore in it. Also, I published books, and it's not expensive to print a book.
Wait, who's they? Who was printing books and not putting lore in it?
They were, I'm not sure. Jeremy will have to answer that. Maybe GW? JP, when I write my game, I'm doing 3 paragraphs to appease the lore hounds. If you already have the toys to play the game, then you already have all the lore you need. Well, I think in that case, more than just deep lore, like really work on that concept. You know, what are the cool hooks that make that world interesting? And then lore theoretically can be expanded out later, but the hooks are really important. Again, like semi-sentient robots in War Machine, and the idea of like the warp and a god emperor and stuff in 40K. Those are Malifaux and this weird material that has this magical bent to it in this other world. Like, there's just cool elements that can be explained in relatively short form, but they have to be interesting. Jeremy, if I was you, wouldn't see all my, let me see, if it was you, wouldn't see all these Rampage getting printed. I'm sorry, I don't understand that.
Well, Rampage is capitalized, so I assume it's a proper
Rampage
name of
was
like a-
the magazine of Simon, I want to say.
Okay, yeah.
No,
So you're saying
I'm
if it
wrong.
was-
That was Ravage magazine.
Oh.
Rampage is something else.
But you're saying if it was cost prohibitive, you wouldn't see like obscure magazines like that being printed.
Yeah,
I think that's
because
what you're
that's
saying.
not acting as a loss leader, right? That's just,
Yeah.
it would need to be supported. And gosh, you go to stores these days and you still see like a crap ton of magazines on the shelf. I mean, we were
Yeah.
just in Smith's the other day, and it's like, who buys all these? But someone obviously
People
does.
do.
I mean, and obviously White Dwarf does just fine. Jeff, I've been playing War Machine since Mark 1. I have a collection of all the books in no quarters. They were cool, but they take up a lot of space. The space is a real thing. That is very true. JP, I say it's
Not
Dune.
nearly as much space as the miniatures, though.
Yeah, the miniatures are way more egregious. I say it's Dune, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and Cthulhu all blended and served as a goulash.
There you go.
Paul, then again, companies keep printing in China. I would save a fortune printing locally. I hope we're moving that way. Those people are lucky to have you, Paul. Many people don't. Jeff, I was a 40K
Yeah,
player,
yeah, we
Orcs,
are.
back in 2nd edition. Then all of the cool Orky stuff turned into generic weapons, and I was sad. Even though the lore still existed, lore not as strong as gameplay for me. Yeah, although I think, so there's like the 3 aspects that I always reference. There's like the lore and the fluff or whatever of the world. Then you have the miniature gaming side, and then you have the miniature hobby side. And generally, if one of those 3 isn't very fun, you can kind of hop to one of the other 2 to kind of keep it going, to keep you in that world. And so if your gameplay isn't very fun, but you've read a lot of the lore, then maybe you go to that for a little while, or you find just some cool miniatures and work on that for a while. If your only interest in the game is really like, I need to be playing games, then I can see where that would definitely be weaker for, not as interesting.
And to be clear, it's like anyone, whatever it is you find interesting about a game or anything else is, I mean, you find it interesting, right? Like that's entirely within you, right?
Yeah.
And so whenever we're talking, I guess we're talking more in broader strokes, like what will help a game to survive or flourish, or what, causes unfun aspects for broad swaths of players. And so we're speaking in kind of generalizations here.
For sure.
So in no way do I want to say you're not allowed to enjoy something that, or an aspect of it that you enjoy, right? Like only you can determine whether or not you're enjoying something.
Let's see, JP, the problem with the churn is that it limits access to gaming. Access to gaming is a huge concern for small producers and indies. Well, and I wonder if, like, for the smaller producers, them specifically not having a churn might be in its own right an appeal to players who are exhausted from being run through the ringer of constantly having to buy miniatures to keep up.
No, whenever we got into Mark II, I remember very specifically seeing comments where they're saying, no, we're not going through this whole system again, we're not doing this. These are our final rules. And I remember as soon as I heard that, I was like, that's amazing, I am so in. And they stayed true to it for like a decade.
For a long time.
Yeah, for like a long time. So I enjoyed that so much.
Yeah.
I felt like that was one of the games I was finally able to sink my teeth into and really get nuanced with.
Jeremy says, well, they don't update the lore of Bolt Action. They do campaign books where they do put history of battles in them so people can see the historic outcome. That's pretty fun.
Well, sure, but they also can't update the lore in Bolt Action. There's just no way to do it.
My cat Elsie says hi. Hi, Elsie. Andrew. Hi, Andrew. I've wondered if doing things like changing model rules to show improvement decline based on the lore would be interesting. Guild Ball would be perfect for it since you buy teams instead of individuals. Let me see if doing things like changing model rules to show improvement and decline based on the lore, like there's so I mean War Machine kind of did that with their epics, you'd have Kane 2 or Sorcerer 3 or whatever. Those would be based on changes in the lore, if that's what you mean. Yeah.
Well, because they represent a Warcaster at a different point in history.
time, yeah.
I mean, originally they created them as a bigger, better version, and they did it for larger point games. But I like when they changed it again into Mark II, they changed it to be just different points and times, and they all should be balanced.
Yeah.
And so I like that.
Fair enough. All right, JP. Everyone loves Gaunt's Ghost. You should get Dave Taylor on. He's absolute barmy over the Tanith First and Only. It is a good book. This is my second time through it, so it's really strong. In fact, it's funny because I'd looked up the other day the top 10 40K books just ever, and Gaunt's Ghost, I want to say, was like the second in there. It was really popular. And it's from like 1999. I did not realize that it was that old. And immediately cannot find it because I'm so good at this. But yeah, so it should be fun. I think it'll be a good, enjoyable little live show. Let's see. Oh, Jeremy, I guess, was talking about 40K Tau. Mandragora V1 of Chaos Knights Codex was 2019. Version 2 was 2022. Just know a new version will be coming out soon because they added the Cerastus Knights and will likely add Moriax War Dogs and the Castus Knights.
Oh, Jeff Setzer is saying there are updated stats for all models for Mark IV rules.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
cool.
kind of touched on that earlier, so that's really awesome. And props to them for doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate that for sure.
Let's see if we can skip through to the end because we're after time.
My Franco-Prussian war armies are 1,200 figs. Woo!
Whee! So that probably takes up a little more space than books, doesn't it?
All
Jeremy,
right,
I'll buy
checkered ball.
physical copies every chance I get. I hate having to look on a phone or tablet to see rules.
Oh, I
I'm always
agree.
dealing with load screens, or if it's on a phone, I'm getting notifications for other stuff, and it's like so distracting. See, Mandragora, tabletop war games, board games have not learned what video game companies now know, that players are part of the content and the new players are paying for. We players are part of the content the new players are paying for. Well, yeah, I mean, it is a ecosystem. Jeremy, as an author, I've always enjoyed making the story for my specific army. I'm playing no matter what setting, but I always make sure it doesn't, that it does fit the actual lore of the universe, doesn't change.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with Jeremy there. Mandragora has an interesting point, though. It's like the players are part of the content. And I mean, again, it's where you'll play, what is it, Ocarina of Time? And you're just alone in this little world. Whereas I kind of play like old classic WoW, and, for our older games. But I like it because you're running around, you just see some other person running over, and you're like, they have this whole agenda. They know what they have this idea of what they're doing in this game. and
They're an
just over
entire
there.
unique soul.
And so, again, for something like wargaming, it's something that, I mean, for a little while, Games Workshop was struggling with, where they're like, we're just a models company, we don't care about rules. And Mandragora's right. It's like, no, you go to a game store, and there's other people playing your game, playing 40K as well. That's part of the experience you're paying for, right?
that's
And it's like a lot of video game companies understand that.
JP, that's like the Dornian Heresy fan canon. You still play 40K, but your head lore is 180 degrees off from the official story. Oh, that would be confusing. Jeff, old players can also gatekeep. Like what Thomas Grable said about old players telling new players what's good and what's trash. Game companies don't need or want that happening.
I agree completely with that.
No, I mean,
Yes.
that's never good. I don't know that new players don't do that too, to an extent. Especially since there's so many new players that come in, they're like, well, what is it that I need to play? And I mean, going into War Machine, there are tons of people always just being like, that's absolute garbage. You would never touch that. This is the only way to do it.
I remember listening to a podcast from one of the competitive groups that played War Machine, and I remember them explaining being in the game store at one point and talking about how really they need to promote the game in a different way. And they need to, when someone goes, oh, well, Signar looks really cool. Like, I don't know, what do you think? And the players are like, no, put that down. How do you want to play the game first? And I remember thinking, that is the worst possible thing. They want to play the blue robots. Like, what,
Yeah, they want to play the cool, like, Soviet-esque army.
He's
They
like,
want to play the...
I need to explain to you the different play styles so we can see what kind of a player you are. Then we can match an army to you so you can be happy. And it's like, that's not how people work.
Yeah, it's like a polylogism, I guess, of
Yeah,
sorts, where
it
you
is a
don't understand
polylogism.
that that's not how even most people are going to approach it. And if some people, which I think they would describe it, like, I want to know how the gameplay works so I can figure out my faction,
Yeah,
then
they'll
you're
tell
like,
you up front.
okay. But if they're just like, oh, I really like this pretty one, you're just like, bash it out of their hand. Like, no. It's like, well, that's gatekeeping.
Yeah, so I think that's what Jeff's almost referring to right there, is that kind of mindset, right?
Jeff said if I listened to that kind of thing, I never would have found the Lawgiver and fielded my rocket dudes, which are, by the way, a lot easier to play in Mark IV. That's awesome.
Nice.
That was really good. And yeah, no, absolutely. Let's see, Mandragora. Not all gatekeeping is bad, though. I love my Chaos Spawn, but having a site warn me that they were overpriced crap that gets shot up saved me from dropping $100 on the box set
So
just to lose on them.
I don't think that's gatekeeping.
Is that gate? Yeah, I was going
That's
to say.
consumer reporting, really.
Yeah, like you looked that up, and just having an opinion on something is hardly gatekeeping. Literally dictating to what somebody needs to be doing, and usually directly, I guess, is. So if you sought that information out, and I mean, nothing would have stopped you from just being like, I'm gonna buy it anyway.
I've done that plenty of times.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't care. I want to do this.
I don't care, and check out. Let's see, we bring the Lob Men off. Oh yeah, and fire too. Jeremy, if someone's telling you something is trash is enough for you to decide you don't want to give it a try, you might be in the wrong hobby. I mean, no, that you don't want to be a dick to anybody, like especially if you're just. It's kind of a know your audience sort of thing, and so being nice to people in general is probably a good default. Jeremy.
Well, I think Jeremy might be talking about people with what is it? They're very susceptible to peer pressure.
Oh yeah.
So if somebody in the store is like, "Oh no, those are garbage," and then you don't want to feel like the person who's going to
Go buy garbage now.
go buy garbage. Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
want them to see you buy it because then they'll think that you're dumb or something.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
It's like
You should probably have a little more confidence in yourself than that. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know, that is a type of peer pressure, you know?
it is type. JP, there's always that guy in the game store that beats the 12-year-old kid and then tells him, "Get good, scrub." And then the kid goes, "I'm crying," and quits the hobby and hates those guys. I hope not. But it does seem like most game stores pretty strongly guard against that. Like, I'm not gonna say it doesn't happen because sure it does. but those are hopefully rare occasions.
I still remember one of the guys in our War Machine group, who I will not name, who was teaching someone new, and the new person beat him. And then, and you know, he had later said to us, like, "No, I let him win because I'm showing him the game." And we're like, "Yeah, okay." And then he had to make sure he repeated that like 3 or 4 more times. And we're like, "Yeah, we
We
get
know.
it. You're better. You're a good player. Like, you don't have to worry."
War Machine brought out weird egos, and I mean it's where I had to really learn to lose, you know, and get a better sense of what is it like where you don't have you're not being a sore loser and all that. Like you kind of have to. There's certain growing pains in a competitive game that you will go through, and so I'm not saying that the game always has to insulate you from ever feeling bad. You would hope that your opponent, even if you get the crap beat out of you, would still be graceful about it. But at the same time, it's a social game, and you learn a lot about people doing that stuff. So it's valuable in lots of ways. BattleTech's Kickstarter is shipping soon. None, as in 0 models, are new units. Everything is something that existed before, but they're producing new versions in plastic with updated art. Okay.
That is a point I've made so many times. A, wargamers are consumers by nature. We all are. And B, you don't have to constantly introduce new models. That as long as you make the models enjoyable, and if you want to sell the new ones, doing updated art, doing resculpts,
Sure, I think that's
alternate sculpts,
fine.
things like that are always very valid.
Jeff, one thing we do know, New Heart was definitely a dream. And Jeremy says
That is
Decker
true.
was not a replicant, and Quaid was on Mars. Prove me wrong, Tommy.
Well,
Hey, Ender.
according to the new movie. But no. Even Ridley Scott was very clear where he's like, no, You need to discuss this for yourself. Like, I have not put the answer in the movie. And so Jeremy's completely right.
So Jeff's point, it's more like having software help online, which can be updated and searched instead of having old manuals that are out of date in 6 months. That's true, but I think that one of the arguments is that manual shouldn't be out of date in 6 months either.
Well, I agree with that. Also, I agree with him, right? Because, like, I remember in Mark II, the War Machine app, you could look up all kinds of stuff on it.
Oh, yeah, very handy.
It was very handy. I just never, ever wanted to play the game with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I want the physical version still. And so being able to have, if you have a physical version, nothing then stops you from having a digital version. You had to create digital version to get it to the press to begin with, to get it to the
Sure.
printing.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, like, that's almost a byproduct of having made the physical stuff. But I agree with them, like having search functions and stuff like that's very easy.
Oh, I loved using War Room, especially after a game and just like looking at models and checking stats and like almost like having flashcards of sorts, like to know what these models did and then kind of thinking about rules interactions. But yeah, in the gameplay, it would always be kind of clunky, at least for me. Maybe I'm
But
just
for what it's
terrible at it.
worth, if I had read a rule book a few times, I could almost just thumb straight to the part that I knew not only had the rules, but had the diagrams next to it and had other stuff with it. And like, I just get used to it physically.
Oh, well, I actually put tabs in the books, so I'm always like, nah, there it is.
Which
Which would
also
be
very
faster than
helpful.
the app in that case. Thomas, hyper-competitive players are fine when playing with other competitive players. The tricky part is when they play against casual players, it can produce lopsided results. Well, and that comes down to, like, social behavior. I mean, hyper-competitive players can potentially, like, play against other competitive people, but also against, like, casual, like, learning games, whatever, because it is a game at the end of the day. And so that comes down to individual personality types. You're going to see that outside of gaming, right? You're going to see that in a workplace or whatever. Just some people play better with others than.
Well, so I'll definitely chalk that up to two different things. Because one, if you're a competitive player who can't turn it off and you're playing against a new player, then you're not so much a competitive player as you're someone who has to show other people that you're better than them. Whereas a player who's actually like trying to be a really good player who can win in all places, you go, oh, I'm playing a new player. All right, I'm pulling out all the crap units and seeing if I can win
If
with
I
these.
can win with this, there you
That's
go.
an actual competitive player who's like, okay, I'll give myself like all the handicaps I can and we'll still go. And we'll see if I can beat the new guy, right? Because then the competitive player's actually still playing competitively,
Right.
but just with handicaps, which that's far better.
Which is also a lesson you can learn from video games, because you would get that. Like, you would have handicaps depending on, like, Super Smash Brothers would do that. Like, the longer
Would
you
they?
lasted,
Okay.
the easier it was to, like, punch you off the platform because
So some video games would do it.
some video games, yeah. Andrew
Okay.
Gora, sorry, post-release changes to gameplay suck. E.g., conversion beam cannons used to be super long range sniper weapons that somehow got stronger the further your enemy was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Stuff like that's kind of interesting, right? Like, it makes you think the opposite of the way you normally would. And so it creates an interesting question for what you're going to do next tactically. So I like stuff like that.
Jeff, I'm 53 and I prefer apps for sure. Far easier to access information, look up rules, and I can carry the entire collection of books to Gen Con without carting around a wagon. Don't disagree with that. I mean, it has its value. But it's like, again, for playing, I'll print cards all day long before I'll refer to an app for immediate gameplay.
Yeah, I'll take a box of cards to play, and then all the rest of the rules can live on a tablet or something. That's fine.
But it is
I still
nice.
want the cards.
Well, and I do really appreciate that Privateer now has the option for both. There's nothing stopping you from playing in the app. By all means, like, do it. It's just, it sucks when that's the only option. Let's see. Oh, JP Got Rockets is going to be at Gen Con this year. Good job. Ender sounds like a pretty interesting, yeah.
Wow.
And one we can't quite get out of yet.
Man, if Ender thinks it's interesting,
I know.
he's the most tactical
He's
mind
the-
that Earth has ever produced.
Yeah, well, Bean potentially was a
That's
competitor.
true. I feel like Bean was a little better at it, but that's just my own.
Thomas, printing your War Machine list is also great for sharing lists with your opponent. Better than the app for that.
100%.
And you can, like, the app has that little sharing code and all that. Like, if it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's like, have both options at least. Brian, the hobby's just too expensive for kids, and they are the lifeblood of the future. War games should not be a luxury hobby, which I guess is where like RPGs are really shining, because you'd mentioned WizKids also have even cheaper than Reaper Bones models, and so yeah, getting into just miniatures at all is dirt cheap. Like really anybody can do it. It's just how do they even know when they walk into a game store and they're like, I don't know, I kind of want to play a game.
Oh no, I mean that's why you hear so many origin stories start with BattleTech, where it's like, yeah, it's a miniature game. You need like 4 miniatures.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Mandragora, my bro and I used to have fun theorizing on how it was even possible. Now they're basically pseudo-metas,
Meltas.
self-meltas, that ruined my artwork on them, featuring sniper artwork. Changers altered my whole theme.
Well, Jeremy's statement up there that you have highlighted,
I remember the first time I did a War Machine tournament with the app, if it died, you just lost. Yeah, I mean, that was the rule.
he says it's garbage. I disagree. I say that if you're
was
going to bring
appropriate.
that
It was
energy to the tournament, then it's appropriate.
Let's see, true to an extent. Brian, accessing gaming is a tricky thing. What are kids interested in today?
I mean, one of the people who I do commissions for runs a D&D group. He comes into town every other week, and he has his kids as part of it. And ever since he started having me paint his 40K army, his kids were very interested in it. And so he is actually the person who's getting models for them and helping them set up an army and teaching them how
So
to
would you
play.
say he's a new player or an old player?
The
The guy you're doing
guy
commissions
I'm
for.
doing commissions for is an old player.
Right?
All of his
So that was the
models
point
are
you were
really
making
old.
earlier.
Right, but
Yes.
you need them to...
So, I
Introduce
mean,
people.
when it comes to a younger generation, even like it's if you have children, that's going to be the best way to bring in that new generation.
Yeah.
To show them
Yeah.
something that you enjoy, but not pressure them into doing it either.
It's the argument I make too, though. It's like, what are kids into? Video games. And so if you're going to get them to, push these little models around and sit and paint and do stuff like that, that's because they're physical things. You're not going to compete with their video games. You're just not. Having whatever apps or whatever that, fit in with the role playing, that's not going to be what they're into it for, because they have so many, what would you say, billions or trillions at this point, other options to like move
Well,
things
it's
around.
true,
That's
but if
hard,
that's
yeah.
something that you let them have available to them at all times, if you promote more tactile things, they're probably more likely to use the tactile things when it becomes an available thing for them to do.
Well, sure. I'm just saying that in terms of like what are the youths
generally
interested in?
interested in
It's like if they're
video
playing
games.
your pen and paper stuff or your physical stuff, it's because they're currently ready to engage in your physical stuff, right?
Yeah.
If you're like, oh look, it comes with a nifty like digital thing, they're just like, I think they have a very similar opinion that I do. They're like,
Well, it's not very
well,
different now, is
That's
it?
not why I'm here. If I want to sit here and interact with digital crap, why am I not playing one of the 50 million video games I own? I'm here because I'm playing with toys and pieces of paper and pencils, and you know what I mean? It's like, that's what I'm here for. And I think that kids are, I say kids, like, I don't know, 14 to 20, are there for like the same reason, right? Mm-hmm. I really do. I think that you lean into the strength of what the miniature and tabletop, pen and paper stuff, you learn into those strengths. You don't, go, look, it has digital stuff too. I don't think that's how you're going to win.
We will see. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of game companies out there right now, and hopefully, again, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all business model.
No.
I mean, so BattleTech is doing well, doing BattleTech things. 40K is just fine doing its thing.
There's not
But
one size
you kind of
fits
do
all.
have to find out what works for you as a business company, what you can reasonably do.
Well, yeah, there's not one size fits all, but there are successful design philosophies and successful business philosophies and less successful ones,
Mandragora, does anyone else long for the day when the biggest hatred in 40K lore was Matt Ward?
I remember that.
Oh my
Him and
gosh.
his Blood Angels Codex.
I'm just gonna skip past a lot of the conversation here just to get to the end here. Let's see here. I always tell people to play the models that look cool. That's how we picked our Mark 1 battle boxes. Yeah, I mean, and that's basically how I picked it, Jeff. Probably doesn't work for every single person, right? But it's a really good place to start. And I do think aesthetics are the primary reason that you get into a war game, which is why I also think it's really important to paint your models if you're going to be playing out in a game store, because like Sea of Grey, your eyes glaze over, who cares? But like really well painted models on this cool terrain, like that really draws you in. You're like, what's going on? It's
That
so
captures the
cool.
imagination.
It does.
Don't skip Thomas Grable's amazing quote.
Good, bad, I'm the guy with the gun.
Yes. You know where
Major
this
Guerra,
quote's
I
from.
agree with love at first sight in theory, but if I'd known lore, gameplay, and sight, I probably would have chosen Legion of Everblight over Circle. For all I know, that alternate would have made me happier. Maybe because I mean, nothing would have stopped you from like switching later, or would you actually be happier that way? Like, yeah, that's a big toss-up.
Well, but that's the thing though. That's where it goes into the game designers, because really they just needed to make those a little more balanced. They needed to know what the faction strength is and let you play out that fantasy.
Bushido has gorgeous models. Yeah, I remember seeing those at Adepticon.
Yeah, I was looking at those too. I was like, wow, those are actually really cool looking.
Yeah. Laser! Or the lacerator. Lacerator. Yo, what's up, everyone? Definitely agree with being able to turn off the competitive mode for other playstyles. Nothing ruins a new player experience more than getting blown out of the water. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I
I mean,
agree.
and then also kind of maybe more accurately defining a true competitive player being someone who can look at a new player and say, okay, I will play all my weakest stuff and see how I can even do with it. Because that makes you a better player still, and you don't feel like you're wasting your time or whatever.
Well, and that's why I differentiate. I think a competitive player is someone who wants to keep testing themselves, whereas the win at all costs player is I need to show everyone that I'm better. Mm-hmm. And so the ones that always like list hammer you, or always like, try to just figure out what you don't know or whatever, and so that they can like try to game it or whatever. It's like, nah, I like the competitive player better.
He continues, the 40K video games do draw a decent amount from kids and teens into the game. I ran into a few who asked about learning the game because they played a shooter on PS5, etc. Much faster to become indulged in an IP universe from turning on a video game than from reading a ton or listening to 2-hour video from Luton. How I got hooked on the lore. He's so good, isn't he? Yeah, I mean, video games have been a wonderful gateway. I feel like that's probably why 40K or GW is like, here, have the license, here, have it. Like,
Oh, yeah.
one of these will be good. Freaking Power Wash game apparently is quite good.
Yeah. I don't know that the Power Wash game is necessarily
No,
the game,
it's not. But
it's
Space
a
Marine,
lot of
right?
fun,
Space
right?
Marine definitely is.
Oh yeah, Dawn of War
I
series.
Dawn of War.
I loved that model, by the way.
Yeah.
The Golden Demon
Oh yeah.
submission. That was the guy
Was the
power
Wash
watching.
guy, yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's amazing.
Power Wash. All right, we are gonna call it here. It
Oh,
is
the
half an hour.
Lacerator says equals Lewis
Yeah, from Tavern.
Tavern, okay.
Yeah, I knew that. But I still always wanted to call you Lacerator instead of Lacerator. I don't know why. I'm just so bad with words, whatever. Anyway, we will be back in 1 week to do
They will be back.
I will be back in 1 week to do the book review for Gaunt's Ghost, book number 1, first and only. So that'll be 6:30 next week on Wednesday, and should only be about an hour. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll have another live stream and maybe another topic that's just as lively, if not a little bit crazy. Sorry I didn't get through all the chat. It was quite a lot, and we were also talking a lot. So thank you all, and we're going to be
Also-
doing the outro. Yes.
Before all these people go, they need to click the like button before they leave.
They've already left, but thank you. Yes, click the like button on your way out. So I'm going to hit the end of stream video, so if you have any questions, I'll be in the chat for a little bit longer. Thank you guys. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Barry, cover me. Copy that. No more sandwiches, Barry. What's wrong with this place? I'm in the west corridor. I'm right outside the generator room. I'm out of bullets. Oh, Barry.